What happens when two of the fastest women on the planet meet again? Sha'Carri Richardson and Shericka Jackson are heading toward another explosive showdown, but this time, there's much more at stake. Because this isn't just another 100-meter race. It's a rematch between two stars who have already fought down to the smallest of margins. And now, they're about to share the track with an Olympic champion and a reigning world champion. On August 23rd, the Diamond League heads to Silesia, Poland, for the Kamila Szymanowska Memorial. And the women's 100 meters could be one of the most loaded races of the entire season. But before we talk about who could win, we need to go back to where this rivalry really started. Back in 2023, Richardson and Jackson met on this same polished track, and the difference between them? Just 0.02 of a second. Richardson crossed the line in 10.76. Jackson followed in 10.78. That wasn't a comfortable victory. That was a race decided almost entirely at the finish. And just weeks later, the stakes became even bigger. At the World Championships in Budapest, the two met again. This time, Richardson produced a stunning 10.65 to win the world title. Jackson took silver. So twice in one summer, Richardson had found a way to finish ahead of Jackson when it mattered. But that was 2023. These are not the same to sprinters anymore. Both women went through difficult periods. Both had questions surrounding their futures. And both are now trying to prove that they still belong at the very top. For Sha'Carri Richardson, the road back has been especially interesting. Her 2025 season never really came together. Injuries disrupted her preparation, and her fastest 100-meter time of the year was only 10.94. At the World Championships in Tokyo, she finished 5th. For an athlete who had once looked almost untouchable, it was a brutal reminder of how quickly sprinting can change. And suddenly, people started asking the question no elite athlete wants to hear. Was Sha'Carri still capable of being the Sha'Carri everyone remembered? Then came 2026, and the answer started becoming very clear. She was coming back. Richardson opened the season with a 10.77 in Florida. Then she ran 10.79 at the Prefontaine Classic in Eugene. And in July, she won another US 100-meter title in 10.77. That victory was especially significant because it moved Richardson level with Melissa Jefferson for the most US women's 100-meter titles won this century. But the most important part wasn't the statistic. It was the way Richardson looked afterward, healthy, confident, and perhaps most importantly, like she was enjoying racing again. That changes the entire equation heading into Poland. Because this isn't the injured version of Sha'Carri. This is a sprinter who has spent the season rebuilding her speed and confidence. But standing across from her will be the woman who has unfinished business of her own. Shericka Jackson. Jackson's comeback story has been completely different. Her 2025 season was heavily affected by injury, and at 32, there were questions about whether she could return to her best. But instead of fading away, Jackson came back through the 200 meters. And that has been a major warning sign for anyone lining up against her. She won Diamond League 200-meter races earlier in the season and established herself as one of the world's leading athletes over the half lap. And remember what Jackson is capable of. Her personal best of 21.41 is still one of the fastest 200-meter performances ever recorded. That tells you something important. Shericka Jackson doesn't need to be the fastest woman out of the blocks to be dangerous. Give her enough track and she becomes a problem. That's why this 100-meter race is so fascinating. Richardson has the explosive speed, Jackson has the strength and experience. And both women know exactly what it feels like to lose to the other. But here's where this race gets even crazier. Because Richardson and Jackson aren't actually the only stars in the field. Enter Melissa Jefferson-Wooden, the reigning world champion, and potentially the biggest threat to both of them. At the World Championships in Tokyo, Jefferson-Wooden ran 10.61 to win the world title. That performance wasn't just a championship victory. It was one of the fastest 100-meter times ever recorded by a woman, and she has continued to prove that it wasn't a one-time performance. In 2026, Jefferson-Wooden has already collected Diamond League victories, including wins in Stockholm and Eugene. And Eugene gave us something very important. Richardson and Jefferson-Wooden lined up against each other, and Jefferson-Wooden won by just 1/100th of a second, 10.78 against 10.79. 100th. That's the kind of margin where a tiny difference in the lean can decide everything. And now imagine that same level of competition, but add Shericka Jackson to the mix. And then add one more name, Julien Alfred, the reigning Olympic champion, the woman who won the 100 meters in Paris, and the athlete who has already beaten many of the biggest names in this generation of sprinting. Alfred's 2026 season has been particularly interesting because she has spent a lot of time competing over 200 meters. And that could actually make her even more dangerous over the final part of the 100. Why? Because 200-meter racing builds strength and speed endurance. And in a 100-meter final, the race isn't necessarily won in the first 30 meters. Sometimes it's decided in the final 30. That's where Alfred can become terrifying. Officially, the Silesia meeting has already been promoted as a clash between the reigning Olympic champion Alfred and world champion Jefferson-Wooden. So now think about the situation. You've got Sha'Carri Richardson, the former world champion, trying to prove she's fully back. You've got Shericka Jackson, a two-time world champion with unfinished business against Richardson. You've got Melissa Jefferson-Wooden, the current world champion, who has already beaten Richardson this season. And you've got Julien Alfred, the Olympic champion who knows exactly what it takes to win when the pressure is highest. And that's still not the entire field. Tina Clayton is another athlete capable of making this race extremely uncomfortable for the favorites. She's one of Jamaica's leading young sprint stars and has already shown she belongs in these conversations. So suddenly, this isn't really a Richardson versus Jackson rematch anymore. It's a four-way battle between different generations, different strengths, and different forms of experience. And there's another reason this race matters: the timing. We're deep into the 2026 season. There is no Olympic Games this year. There is no traditional World Championships waiting at the end of the summer. Instead, the athletes are fighting for Diamond League points and positioning ahead of the major season-ending competitions. The Wanda Diamond League final in Brussels is scheduled for September 4th and 5th. And after that comes the inaugural World Athletics Ultimate Championship in Budapest from September 11th to 13th. So every major race from this point forward carries extra weight. There are fewer opportunities to make a statement. And that's exactly why Silesia matters. Because one great race here can completely change the conversation. Imagine Richardson wins. Suddenly, the comeback is no longer just a comeback. It's a warning. Imagine Jackson wins. After everything she's been through, beating Richardson again on this stage would be a massive statement. If Jefferson-Wooden wins, she strengthens her position as the woman everyone else is chasing. And if Alfred wins, the Olympic champion reminds everyone that she doesn't need to run the fastest time of the season to be the most dangerous woman in the final. That's what makes this race so unpredictable. There isn't one obvious weakness you can point to. Richardson can explode out of the blocks. Jackson can build through the race. Jefferson-Wooden has proven she can deliver under championship pressure. And Alfred has the kind of finishing strength that can punish anyone who fades late. So the biggest question isn't simply, who is the fastest? It's this: who can put together the perfect 100 meters on August 23rd? Because in a race this close, one bad start can end your chances. One hesitation can cost 100th, and one perfect lean can turn a silver medal into gold. 3 years ago, Sha'Carri Richardson beat Shericka Jackson by 2/100ths of a second on this same polished track. Now they return, but this time, the target on both of their backs is even bigger. Because waiting in the same race are the Olympic champion, the world champion, and some of the fastest sprinters on the planet. So when the gun goes off in Silesia, there won't be anywhere to hide. And the real question is no longer whether Sha'Carri Richardson and Shericka Jackson can recreate their old rivalry. It's whether either woman can survive the fastest 100-meter showdown of the summer.